Okay, welcome back to the Purple Cloud podcast. And today we have a very special guest. We've got Robert Hoffman, who is the president and CEO of Yosan University and the dean of the doctoral program there. And they are doing some wonderful, very interesting things over there, bucking the trends of the industry in America, as I understand it. And I am based in Australia, so I'm really interested in learning a little bit about what's going on over there, what you guys are doing. So, welcome, Rob.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I've been a fan for a long time, so
Oh,
it's great to be on the podcast and following some pretty illustrious footsteps. So it's exciting.
yes. So it was actually, I don't know if I'm speaking out of school, but Alan, who was our last guest, recommended. He said you were doing some really wonderful things in the industry, um, and really, yeah, turning things around. As I understand it, there are a lot of schools closing in America at the moment, and this kind of thing. And you guys are increasing numbers. You're doing all kinds of research, this kind of thing. So maybe to get started with, you could help me understand a little bit about the landscape in America,
Sure.
because I think it's somewhat similar to Australia, but obviously a lot bigger, and there's some differences going on there.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a time of transition, to put it lightly. Contraction is probably the more appropriate term. Acupuncture has about a 50-year licensed history, like a professional history. Of course, prior to that, it was, primarily Chinese immigrants practicing in Chinatowns and small offices, and they were often persecuted. I mean, a lot of that history is finally coming out, but in our 50-year licensable history or professional history, we've had kind of multiple arms of this profession grow, and part of that is the education industry. Part of that is the professional industry, actual practitioners, and then there are the ancillary pieces like herbal companies, our vendors, people like that, and they've kind of grown, at different paces, with different trajectories, and the education sector that I'm primarily in now has had these incredible increases and this rise, I think, to the point where we simply were overeducating, and graduating too many practitioners, more so than the actual than the acceptance of acupuncture in the community could accept. We can't keep graduating practitioners and expect everybody to open private practices. That's just an impossible, kind of um, that's an impossible way to build a profession. It takes time to build, acceptance of acupuncture in the marketplace. It takes time to build acceptance of Chinese medicine, herbs, and acupuncture in institutional healthcare like hospitals, the VA. And, my kind of taking a historical look back is that education just really outpaced the acceptance of the practice itself. So we have these incredible time periods where the student bodies of these schools grew, far beyond what the community would accept, in practice. And now, since 2014, 2015, we see this incredible decline of students actually entering acupuncture schools. So in the early 2010s, we have upwards of like 60 acupuncture schools. Um, there were close to 9,000, almost 10,000 students across the entire educational
Mm.
sphere. And then 2014, 2015, we see a little, a kind of a, we see a turnaround where all of a sudden the populations in the schools are starting to drop off really significantly. And from late 2014 into 2015 up until COVID, we had about a 30% decline in education, of students entering the TCM education sphere. Um, and that was noticed, of course. All the schools were, kind of panicking. You see a couple closures in that time. Um, but COVID kind of, hit all of us, and it certainly hurt the schools, but many of the schools were able to take out loans from the government. They received funding and grants and all kinds of things. So it slowed down the reaction time of these schools closing. Coming out of COVID, all of that funding is gone, and then you start to see the schools suffering again. Not only were they suffering from the natural decline in enrollment that had started in 2015, but now they're suffering from the kind of the post-COVID blues, the economy, people not entering this healthcare profession. So we've seen this overall contraction. And really, for the last 2 years, our population of students across the country is pretty even. It's about 5,200 students across all Chinese medicine programs. And that's held pretty steady. But now we have regulatory changes, we have financial aid changes, and that's going to start hitting us about mid-year next year. And now everybody's scrambling to figure out what that is. So it's kind of like, out of the frying pan into the fire, pour gasoline on the fire.
Yeah, right. What are the regulatory changes specifically for Chinese medicine?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the in the last budgetary bill that was passed in Congress, they ended what's called the Grad Plus loan. So we have two kinds of financial aid in Chinese medicine, or we have two kinds of financial aid, I should say, in across all education, higher education. We have the standard kind of unsubsidized loans that people take in their undergraduate years, and there's a cap on that. And when you reach that, you can take part in what's called the Grad Plus loan. And as of July next year, there is no more Grad Plus loan. So that was the first piece, and that was going to impact, every school is a little bit different, but I think we can probably safely say somewhere between 15 to 30% of acupuncture students probably have a Grad Plus loan. So that was going to be no more. Luckily, students that are already in the pipeline can still take advantage of those loans. They're grandfathered in, so it was going to affect the new students coming into the pipeline. And then just about 10 days ago, 13 days ago maybe, there was another part of the regulation brought in and approved, and it's now going to lower the total lifetime amount of loans that a student can take out. And part of that regulation also classified acupuncture and Chinese medicine not as a healthcare profession, not as a doctorate profession, but as simply a graduate degree. So it lowered the cap even more. So now students coming into Chinese medicine, as of right now, they're limited to $100,000 of loans over their lifetime, and that would include their undergraduate education. So if you think about a student coming out of a four-year college here in America, the average is about $30,000 to $40,000 in undergraduate financial aid loans. If they wanted to go to a four-year acupuncture school with an average tuition of $65,000 to $75,000 over 4 years, plus taking out living expenses, there's no way they can afford. Based on financial aid, there's no way they can afford the programs.
Yeah, right.
So we're all scrambling. We're all freaking out. How do we fix this?
Yeah. Well, maybe you can start to sort of introduce what you're doing at Yosan, which has been sort of bucking these trends, as I understand it. You've been increasing your students during this period where everyone else is sort of, seems to be decreasing.
Maybe we could rewind.
Okay.
Second, prior to these regulations, set up the framework there. So
Sure.
I came back to Yosan in 2019 as the doctoral dean. I didn't really expect that. I really thought like getting my acupuncture degree was going to be my ticket out of Los Angeles. My wife and I fantasized about like opening a clinic in Hawaii or Costa Rica or something outside of Los Angeles. But as I was finishing my doctoral program in 2018, so I finished my master's in 2015, finished my doctorate in 2018, and I started to get phone calls and interest from around the industry from a couple different schools that were interested in bringing me on at least as a doctoral dean. So kind of looking for signs of what my career trajectory was going to be, it made sense at the time. We had started a small private practice. I was working at Dragon Herbs, an herbal company, and then here was this opportunity to come and work in the doctoral department. So I started that. I did that. We started with a very small doctoral program. At the time, I think we had 11 students. Within a year, we had doubled that and gotten to 22 students. And that's been steady all the way through. We generally have about 25 to 30 students, and that's kind of where I want to keep it. It's a nice size for a doctoral program. It allows for real faculty interaction, building mentorships, lifelong partnerships, that kind of idea. But then the whole time I was building the doctoral program, student populations continued to decline. So Yosan at its peak was about the highest population we ever had was, I think, 220 back in the heyday, 2014. And around 2022, we had just about 80 students. So we'd really, taken a pretty large hit. And that had been a steady decline from 2014 into COVID. So in speaking with the administration and the founders, we knew we had to make an administrative change. And they asked if I wanted the gig. I wasn't sure, to be honest, because I thought, honestly, like, do you want to be the president or the CEO that's in charge of a school when it closes? That's the trajectory where we were in. So I sat with it for, kind of a couple months, actually. And then kept having meetings and talking to the board of trustees and our founders, and decided that I had enough of an idea of what we might do to turn things around. So we started that at really the last months of December of 22. And as you already alluded to, we've really turned it around. We went from 80 students. We're now up at around 280 students. We should cross the 300 mark in January. It's been a roller coaster. I pretty much work 7 days a week, most days roughly 16 hours a day. Some days are longer. But it's incredibly rewarding. So some of the things we did, number one is we focused on the clinic as something that's very successful for us and is most important for the students. We expanded our clinic. We brought it online, eight new rooms to start. So we went from 14 rooms to 22 rooms, and we created this fellowship program. So our graduates, once they're licensed, they can come back to the Yosan Clinic and they can actually practice here and get paid, and they have full access to staff and the herbal room, the herbal pharmacy, and their faculty supervisors. So it's a kind of a paid residency,
So
which was really, it's
that's
really unique in
important.
the industry.
Yeah.
Nobody had really been doing that. So it's a 1-year program. They can stay longer if they like.
And they get
But it
paid during
gives,
that time?
they get paid during that whole time. They still have access to their teachers, and it's been really successful. At any point, we have, a minimum of 3 fellows, and it's been as high as like 7 fellows, just kind of depends on the schedule. And this year, we actually expanded that even further. A donor gave us some money to build out an entire fellows hall. So now they have 3 rooms devoted to them, to schedule and treat their own patients there. So that program is expanding. And then I guess the most important thing, so there's this great video you can find on YouTube of Steve Jobs back in like the mid 90s, and he's come back to Apple, after he was kicked out. He's come back as a consultant. And in the video, like, one of the shareholders stands up and is basically like, "What are you doing here?" Like, why? Like, you don't even know what open doc is. Like, they give him, he kind of rattles Steve Jobs, and Steve goes into a whole thing about, how do you transform an industry? How do you transform the computer industry? And I've watched this video like dozens of times, and the most important thing he says in the video is like, basically, our whole industry is thinking about, in his case, the computer industry was thinking about product development wrong. You're all thinking from code and machines and technology. He's like, we need to think about the customer experience. If we think about the customer experience and then work backwards, right, that's how we're going to be successful. And that's what's going to set Apple apart. And clearly, 20, 30 years later, in hindsight, he was right. So that video has sat with me for a really long time. So when I became the president, you know, I went to staff, I went to our admin and our faculty, and I said, like, I want to think that way, right? First of all, from the clinic standpoint, what is the patient experience, right? Are they getting the healthcare they want? Are they getting the compassion that they're seeking? Are they able to book appointments? Is it easy to get in here, right? Or are there roadblocks? Like, is the price too much? Is the price too little? Like all of these things. What is their experience in clinic? And then I went to the academic team and I said, well, you know, in line with that, what's the student experience, right? Is everything from the minute they hit the website, can they find the information they need? Is the application easy to do? Is financial aid information available to them? Is even the tuition and the cost of being here, you know, easy to find? And then taking that a next step further, when that student or that patient steps on campus, what's their experience like? Are they confused walking down the hall what room they're supposed to be in? Can they not find the clinic? Can they not find admissions? Like all of these things, if I think a little bit, you know, and hope that maybe I can channel that Steve Jobs idea, like what is the student experience and patient experience? And if we can alter the systems and transform the university thinking about that first, then that will right this ship. So we really, I mean, we most of the admin here is new within the last 2.5, 3 years. We've hired like the best faculty that we can possibly find locally and across the country. We've renovated the building. We've again expanded clinic even further. I think we now have 28 treatment rooms. We're going to see 25,000 patients this year internally and another 5,000 in our externships. So we're seeing about 30,000 patients throughout our clinic system annually. So it was really all about that end user experience, that I kind of borrowed from Steve Jobs.
Yeah, that's amazing. Just getting back to especially what you've said about that fellowship program. I've had some discussions with people in Australia, and we've really identified that as to provide that mentorship early on in someone's career, rather than just cutting them loose and letting them fend for themselves, and then they have to sort of develop a business when their skills probably aren't fully formed, on the not that confident. Seeing people, giving people that cushion is really amazing. I think it's more of that kind of thing is really needed and very, very valuable. They typically stay on for about a year. Is that right? Or
So, some stay on a little bit less, because not everybody's
Okay.
from Los Angeles or stays in
Right.
Los Angeles, but they still want the experience. It's just about a year, and some of them stay on longer. They move up to what we call an associate practitioner, or if they stay long enough, they become a senior practitioner or a faculty practitioner. And of course, their rates and their pay go up alongside all of that. But that idea that you mentioned of like, you're starting a business and your skills aren't quite there yet is challenging, and I've talked to other practitioners, and in some ways it can be good, because if you're not totally booked, you can spend an hour and a half, 2 hours with a patient, and it's time to build those skills and kind of refine your sense of who you are as a practitioner. But it's nice for somebody to be able to make a living, and have the support of a mature clinic and a mature faculty and office staff that can kind of help guide you, so that if you do decide to go off on your own, you've got some more confidence, you've got some more strength. I mean, I remember the first time I saw a patient without my supervisor in the next room. I was in my office and I was like, wow, it's all on me. There's nobody to go back to. And thankfully, like, I have a couple Brant Stickleys kind of on my speed dial if I need to hit Brant with some formula questions and people like that. But yeah, if we can help build that confidence, and then our goal in the coming year is, now that our clinic is, rocking, and we're seeing just about 80% occupancy. So we still have a little room for growth, but that's still pretty significant. The goal now is to transport that around the Los Angeles area. So we're looking at a couple different regions to open some satellite clinics. And those clinics would have both faculty or senior practitioners, faculty supervisors, and they would be a spot for both fellows and interns as well to practice at. So, if we can expand that out and help graduates all around the Los Angeles area build their practices and build their patient counts, essentially, I think it could be really transforming.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And do you see something like that? I'm wondering, contributing more to the acceptance of Chinese medicine, at least in the Los Angeles community. In
Yeah, I mean, I have to acknowledge, of course, that, Los Angeles is a bubble inside another bubble
yeah,
that's
very, very much.
California.
Sure.
Like I can't say that this model works in Montana,
Mm,
or Alabama. Like we've got a little bit of a bubble, and we're trying to utilize whatever the strengths of that bubble or the demographics of that bubble, in a way that helps propel the medicine forward. So, yeah, I do think, the more we can expose the public, obviously, to Chinese medicine and acupuncture, of course, that helps build the acceptance in the overall marketplace. And that's also one of the reasons we are what we call a community clinic. We keep our rates really low. For the student interns, it's $40 for treatment. And then is that true? Yes, all of our externship sites are free. And then once a week on campus, we also have a free community clinic, group acupuncture clinic. So we're trying to keep it as affordable as possible so we can, really build that exposure. The free clinic is something we started about 2 years ago. And honestly, I didn't know if it was going to work. Our board of trustees was kind of like, well, how can you have a paid clinic and then across the hall have a free clinic? Or isn't the free clinic, like, why would anybody pay? And I was nervous about it as well. But when I did kind of the analysis, I thought, if you're getting acupuncture in a paid clinic and you have a private treatment room, you have your intern or your practitioner that you see all the time and that you're comfortable with, I don't think that that's the same demographic that's going to come to the free clinic. I think these are different groups of people. So we set up the free clinic. The first day, it started at 2 p.m. and we set up the room, and I went back upstairs to my office and I thought, oh God, what if nobody shows up? Or what if I go down there and it's all of our paid patients, wanting free acupuncture? Like, how are these systems gonna work together? And I went down about 15 minutes before the clinic started, and there was a line down the hallway and out the door to get into the free clinic. And as we're signing people in, we're asking them, like, are you a patient? Have you ever been to Yosan before? Are you a regular patient? And in that first week, not one person had ever been to Yosan before, nor were they regular acupuncture patients. They said, I've always wanted to try it. I couldn't afford it. I've always wanted to come to this building, but I thought it would be too expensive for me. So what happened is this community clinic, this free clinic, expanded our community outreach, beyond what we could have done, any other way. And now the two clinics like kind of feed off of each other. Patients that, try it in the community clinic in the group setting, who maybe don't feel comfortable with that, or maybe they have a very complicated case and they need an extended intake and privacy as well. They're actually being referred into the primary clinic. And then our regular patients that are in the primary paid clinic who want acupuncture more than once a week, they're jumping over into the free clinic so they can get 2 or 3 treatments a week, but finding a cost savings in it. So it's definitely increasing this awareness and this acceptance of acupuncture.
Yeah, that's really great. And I don't know, do you see what do you see the trends of this acceptance going forwards, I guess nationally in the next decade or so, 5 years, this kind of thing? I know it's a big
That's
question.
the yeah. I think if I knew that, but I mean, we already see massive trends in acupuncture, and I think this is where hopefully we're going to find. Again, we still haven't tackled the changes in financial aid, but we're we have the potential to see some equilibrium because we have acupuncture in many major hospitals. I would venture to say most major hospitals in America
Oh,
have
really?
some form of, oh yeah, UCSF, UCLA, USC, St. Joseph's, Providence, Keck Medical Center, Kaiser. I mean,
Mm,
again, I'm dealing in a California bubble, so I have to,
okay.
I have to recognize that. But in many of these large healthcare systems, we're seeing some form of acupuncture. And that's a huge plus. The VA, of course, is the largest employer of acupuncturists in the country, the Veterans Affairs Association.
Mm,
So we actually, starting in January, we have a doctoral externship there at the VA in Westwood. So we're seeing, this really this acceptance across multiple healthcare systems. It's written into our primary health insurance system, the ACA. Acupuncturists in California and a few other states are considered primary care health practitioners. So we might be the only doctor that a patient, will see through the year. So as that builds, right, the number of acupuncturists needed in the marketplace is going to grow. So the hope, my thought as I do my analysis on a regular basis is that the contraction of the education sector is going to meet, the increase in acceptance in acupuncture and Chinese medicine. At some
mm.
point, there's going to be homeostasis. Now, whether that homeostasis is with 40 acupuncture schools or 15, I don't know. But the hope is that there is some level of homeostasis out there.
So in America, is there sort of potential for employment beyond just having a private practice? Is there much of that? Do you see that sort of
Yeah,
developing?
that's all these hospital systems. That's all these
Yeah.
VA positions. We haven't released it, so my data is going to be kind of anecdotal. But last month, I scoured all of the employment sites, LinkedIn and Indeed and Monster and all of these kinds of things, the local ones, Craigslist as well. And I put together a database of all of the available jobs for acupuncturists across all of these and just within the Southern California area. And the amount of jobs that I was able to find was greater than the number of graduates I had last year.
Mm,
And in speaking with some of those people, they couldn't find, they weren't getting enough resumes to hire somebody.
mm.
So this is totally anecdotal. This is not a, this is not a scientific survey, but at least in putting that database together, it was really surprising because that wasn't the case when I graduated in 2015.
Mm.
When I graduated, my wife and I were scouring Craigslist and all these kind of job sites, and there was nothing out there.
Yeah.
So this, to me, that was really encouraging.
Yeah, it's certainly not the case in Australia. I believe there are few hospitals. They're mostly cancer-based clinics.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of
I
oncology clinics.
Yeah, I worked in one for a bit, and it was not the greatest. I will say it's not the greatest experience. It wasn't that
Hmm.
supportive, and I was kind of sidelined. Um, so yeah, it's really heartening to hear that's the trend over there. I
Oh
guess,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, that's
and
really
really
great.
big, like really forward thinking hospitals and programs like Sloan Kettering Memorial in New York has a program,
Mm,
Fred Hutch up in Seattle, the UCSF OSHA program that was put together by Robin Adcock in pediatrics. I mean, really brilliant programs
mm. And what role
that,
do you?
you know, go
Sorry, I
ahead.
was
Yeah.
just going to say, what role do you see research um, taking in this sort of
This is
trend?
my dream, basically. Like that's my interest is one of my interests. I keep my feet in all these varied
Mm,
pools. Like I have the pool that you and I have talked about offline of like, the Taoist, the Taoist
mm,
medicine, Taoist practice. Like that's
hmm.
my one, my one thing. And then research and science is kind of the other pool that my feet are in. And then of course there's just education and TCM education in general. So I'm like constantly migrating between these things because of course they're all tied together. when I graduated from my doctoral program here, I also entered a PhD program in China at
Mm.
Zhejiang Chinese Medicine University, because I wanted to do more research. And the DAOM programs in America, it's a 2-year program. You're really just
Mm.
getting like, here's the basis of research, do a systematic review. We don't know if you'll ever publish, but here's your
Mm.
program. And I wanted to go much further than that. So Zhejiang has kind of allowed that to happen for me. Unfortunately, COVID also landed in the middle of that, so
Mm.
my entire PhD was derailed, and we're back on track now. But the curriculum of Chinese medicine schools in America, it's a 4-year master's, or now this professional or entry level doctorate. We're building clinicians. We're not building researchers.
Mm.
So as students graduate and go out into the world, we're very limited in our ability to perform research and even understand research in some cases. So there's just a few of us who are trying to push the envelope as much as possible. When I got to the doctoral department here, we'd had 9 cohorts had graduated, and they'd all written a capstone or a dissertation, but only a few had ever published. So I started really pushing our doctoral students, like, number one, not just to do systematic reviews, which are extremely important, but also to get into doing pilot studies and clinical trials. So that was like the first 3 years, pushing these students, like, I know it's only 2 years, but you can run a pilot study, you can run a survey, you can generate data. And then in these last 2 years, now I'm trying to help everybody publish. I get a lot of the students that are very kind. They want me to be their advisor. But my rule is, if you want me to be your advisor, we have to publish. We're not just doing a capstone that sits on the shelf. So right now we have 3 papers in peer review. We had a couple published last year, but it's building a research department that can actually publish from the ground up is a
Mm.
lot of work, and it takes a lot of time. And you have to have an administrator that, first of all, knows how to do it, but also, is willing to spend those hours off work,
Mm.
reviewing papers. And I'm sitting here with my Zoom in the center, and right to my right are all the papers I have to review over the
Mm.
next
Yeah.
week. So it requires an incredible amount of dedication and a lot of long hours to build a research program that can actually go from, essentially the germ of idea, from a hypothesis to a capstone or a dissertation project, and bring that all the way through to publication. And schools are so small, we don't always have the resources to do that. So for me, that part is like a labor of love. Like, I'm not really paid to do that part, because it just takes so many hours.
Mm. What sort of research are you guys doing at the moment? Mostly on acupuncture or herbal medicine as well, or?
Both, yeah. So we've got the paper. One of the papers that's in review right now is one of our doctoral students. One of our primary specialties is in reproductive medicine and women's health, and one of our doctoral students who works at an IVF clinic. Part of the drugs that the woman is given to prior to egg retrieval, they often cause headaches. It's one of the primary side effects. So she looked at acupuncture and the effects of acupuncture on these women who had headaches to see if it would reduce the headaches. We've done the one paper that I need to review this weekend. Looked at acupuncture versus chiropractic care, and the effects of those 2 interventions on anxiety and depression in HIV patients. We've done a couple surveys about the outcomes of acupuncture. There's one study that's just begun on the use of Ganoderma lucidum, reishi mushroom,
Mm-hmm.
on cardiovascular outcomes, and another one that's looking at, what was the other one I was just thinking of? Sorry, it left my head.
That's all right.
But there's a couple herbal studies in there too. the prostate. Yeah. So we just partnered with Pacific Biologic, which is an herbal company here on the in the Pacific Northwest, and they have a formula that was created by Andy Ellis, and we're going to measure the effects, its effects on prostate health.
Oh, that's great. So
Yeah.
you've got
So
a
there's a lot
few
of. Oh
partners in
yeah.
this research? Yeah.
Yeah. So when we do herbal. When we do the herbal studies, of course, we reach out to companies, to look for help because
Mm.
it can be thousands of dollars just
Yeah,
sourcing
yeah,
the
yeah.
product. So if we can get some sponsorship, and of course they're mentioned in the study, and then we acknowledge them and acknowledge the potential conflicts and all of that. But we definitely are reaching out to sponsors in this because again, tiny school, 300 students,
Mm.
small research budgets. So anywhere we can find that kind of help is it's important.
Mm. And I know you travel to China often. You've got a
Yeah.
few sort of connections over there. What sort of connections are you making with some of the universities over there, I believe?
Yeah, so I started. I imagine like you, like I started going to China for kung fu. I started
Yes,
going
pretty
because
pretty much.
you know I I was taking kung fu here, and I had amazing teachers, and everybody was telling me in the late '90s and early 2000s, like, kung fu's dead in China. There's no temples. There's no masters. Everybody's gone to Malaysia. Like, it was like this very like don't bother. But just like Chinese medicine, I feel like it's my responsibility to understand the culture, that these practices came from, like whether language, history, religion, visiting the source, all of those things were important to me. So I started visiting China just about 20 years ago, not to find a teacher. I wasn't looking for a guru or anything like that. I wanted to visit. I wanted to see what was there. And I had this great interest in Taoism, but of course, in the early 2000s, there was nothing here in
Mm.
America to really latch onto. It was just kind of the whatever translation of the Tao Te Ching you could find. So I started going to China in 2006, and instantly fell in love. And as you know, like China can just destroy you some days, and then the
Oh
next
yeah,
day it's like it's totally magical, right?
yeah,
You have
yeah.
these moments where you're like, what have I done? I could be on a beach in Costa Rica surfing, but here I am in the rain and no bathrooms and nobody understands me and I'm miserable and I miss my family. But the next day you have like the most unbelievable experience, that could only have happened at that place at that time. So China kept doing that to me, where I would go and through, relationships and friends just start to have these incredible experiences. And I actually considered moving to Nanjing in 2010. I was going to go to school there,
Mm.
but I had one of those trips that was terrible, where nothing worked. Nobody understood me. It was just like, okay, I can't live here. So that's when I came back to Yosan. But I kept those contacts and I kept going back. I have my Taiji Shifu, my Taiji teachers in Nanjing. I kept visiting mountains. I spent, a fair amount of time in the Zhongnan Mountains, of course, chasing Bill Porter's ghost and, and Ed Berger's, amongst white clouds and that kind of thing. I did a fair amount of that. But it was really the PhD program, that began to solidify those connections.
When
Going
you started
to
studying, yeah.
when I started studying. Yeah,
Yeah.
my
Okay.
Taiji Shifu, my Taiji Shifu, I met him and his brother in 2009, and still study with them. So I had that connection in Nanjing this whole time. But when I started going to Hangzhou 3 times a year, and seeing the same teachers and having the same, kind of clinical experiences every year, that's what really started to shift both my understanding of China and also China's acceptance of me. And now I've been going just about twice a year. I think I have to go back in January, much to the dismay of my family. but this last trip, I was there at the end of October into November, and I started speaking at a conference in Hangzhou at Zhejiang Chinese Medicine University, and then I had meetings in Nanjing and Shanghai, and they were all like super positive. They're interested in doing research collaboration, student exchange, faculty exchange. Like it seems like a time, at least from my perspective, where we have an opportunity to really build some meaningful relationships. So I'm basically running with that. I mean, I'm going
Mm,
to do everything I can to build these experiences, and we already have one of our doctoral students just enrolled in the PhD program at Zhejiang, so it's starting
mm.
to kind of build that momentum.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's one of the things. Yeah, still I'm trying to do is get more of a, because it can be isolated, and I want more people to have those experiences. I know a lot of people go
Yeah,
for a month or two,
yeah,
um, but without knowing the right people, or getting the right people, you can waste your time, you can waste your money,
totally
like
a
you
waste of
mentioned,
time.
have
Yeah,
horrible experiences, all of this kind of thing.
yes.
So it's great you're trying to, I guess, cater these experiences or tailor these experiences, curate them so
Well,
that they are not a waste of time for people and they actually
yeah,
can
I
absorb
think that's
something
the
from them.
that's the key. I mean, so many of us just go there alone and hope that it,
Mm,
or maybe you go with a group one time and then you go alone, and it's like it's just so the experiences are so varied. And there's this saying like, if you visit China and you only go to Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong, you haven't seen China.
mm,
It's like it takes it takes repeated trips. It takes putting yourself in uncomfortable positions. It takes
mm,
getting out of the major cities. It's a lot of effort, and I've wondered at times. I've told this story before, but it does set up, the picture. Like a lot of my friends were doing the online doctoral degree, and we were all kind of online on Facebook or whatever, discussing the woes of doctoral homework.
mm,
And here I was in Hangzhou in the winter. It was cold and rainy. The apartment I rented smelled like a sewer. My son was only like maybe 3 months old, and I was missing him terribly, and my wife, of course. And like, I was just like laying in bed, like, nobody expected this of me. I did this to myself, but I'm still
100%.
100%. But I'm still really bitter that my friends are complaining about, how many pages they have to write about
Mm,
this case study or something. It was just
mm,
like, man, I'm out here, like, even though I have the support of the university somewhat, it's like I'm really out here on my own.
mm,
And those moments are like a real struggle. But again, that next day in clinic is like
mm,
mind blowing, or the next day with my Tai Chi teacher is just unreal, and it's like, you're right. I want people to have those experiences. And because I know it can be hard and it can take so many visits, I do want to kind of curate that a little bit.
mm,
I do want to be able to say, like, here's where you need to be. If this is your interest,
mm,
maybe these are the people you want to be with.
mm,
Um, and it took me a long time, to get there as well. My Shang Han Lun teacher, who I just love, you know, it took like a whole bunch of meetings with him, visiting him in clinic and sitting in the back. Chinese clinics, there's 20 patients around, and the
mm,
student, if it's a good teacher, a good clinician, there's lots of students kind of looking over the shoulders, and you're all kind of taking notes. And I was there by invitation of the university, and he was very nice and cordial and kept giving me all information and made sure I took pictures of everything. And after a little bit, he was just like, why are you here? And I was like, well, I'm here to, I'm going to get my PhD, and I'm here to learn from you. And he's like, yeah, okay. And then a little time passes, and he's like, but like, is this your only trip, kind of idea? And I was like,
mm,
no, 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 I'll be here like a few times a year. And he's like, okay, okay. And he's like, well, what about when you finish the degree? And I was like, well, if you're open to it, like, I will come back every year, and see you and learn from you. And he thought about that, and he was like, okay. And he, like, opened up his phone, gave me his WeChat, and his entire schedule. And he's like, when you're not in the other clinics, you're with me. So you follow me every time you're here in China, and in that moment, it was like everything kind of shifted in that moment.
Mm.
And his students were on WeChat with me, and they're like sending me all the databases of his formulas and his case studies. And it was like, all of a sudden there was this like acceptance,
Mm.
and like, ever since then, every time I go, we hold hands, like going to the subway, and he makes sure I get off at the right train station.
Mm.
And it's like, I want everybody to have that experience, not just observing in a clinic for a couple hours and then going to a tea shop. Like, I want you to have this like real meaningful connection with a mentor who
Mm.
now I can email him a tongue and a pulse and say, I can't figure this thing out. And he's like, well, that's because you're doing the wrong formula. It should be
Mm.
this,
Mm.
like, but those relationships, you know this is,
Mm.
it's you and Fen,
Mm.
it's not fate, but like, do we have destiny in a relationship?
Mm. Yeah,
And
for
it's
sure.
also your guangxi. It's also your friendship and all the other relationships
Mm.
that you're building. So I've just felt like over these 20 years, if I keep building those relationships, then I can help other students and other practitioners, when they want to visit China.
Mm. And just to switch gears a little bit, you've come from a completely different background. You've been a music producer for a number of years. You've worked with some quite illustrious people. I'm sure it's sort of geared your mindset in a certain way, and you've brought a certain mindset into
Yeah.
Chinese medicine. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, yeah, your background and how you've brought that sort of thinking and into your current position.
Yeah, totally. And maybe I think a little bit of that is why we've had this kind of transformation at Yosan. So
Mm.
when I was a teenager, I was doing martial arts and karate and meditating, and I was very serious about all of that. And I was a decent athlete, but I was like, I'm not going to be a professional
Mm.
athlete. I'm not going to be a karate instructor. Like, what is my life going to be? And the other great love I had was music. Also, not really a smart career choice.
Mm.
But that worked out well. And I remember when I was in college, I was in music school, and the last 3 months or so, the guidance counselor called, or we had like a employment counselor, and he called me in. He said, well, what's your plan? And I said, well, I'm going to get a job in New York City at one of the big studios, and I really want to work with Michael Jackson and his engineer, Bruce Swedian, and I really want to work with Quincy Jones. And this is like 1992. And I said, I really want to work with Janet Jackson and her producers, Jam and Lewis. And the guy looks at me like I'm insane. And he essentially cursed at me and said, get out of my office and come back when you have a solid plan.
Mm.
So I never talked to him again. But about 3 months later, I got a job at a studio in New York called the Hit Factory, which was the biggest recording studio
Mm.
in New York at the time. And I started as an assistant there, making $225 a week, working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. So no overtime.
Mm.
Living in my parents' house, taking a train from New Jersey to New York every day. My mom paid for my train ticket because it was, probably as much as I made in a week. And I just started working really hard there. And within about 3 months of starting, I was on sessions with Aretha Franklin. I worked on the Wolf soundtrack, the Jack Nicholson movie. I worked a lot with a lot of the rap and R&B stuff that was happening in New York at the time, like
Mm.
Notorious B.I.G. But then my fate completely changed. The earthquake in California happened, the Northridge earthquake, and Michael Jackson and his team were about to start making a record in Los Angeles, flew to New York to start making a record there. And I was asked by the owners of the studio to start working on that recording session. So within 3 months of starting there, here I
Mm.
was working with Michael Jackson,
Mm.
with his engineer, Bruce Swedian, who was a legend and one of my great mentors of my life. And I worked with that team for about 3 years. And during that, I also got to work with Quincy Jones. And then I worked with Janet Jackson and her production team, Jam and Lewis, and I got to work with David Foster and Babyface. I mean, the cast of characters and musicians that came through those recording sessions was unreal. And I just soaked it up. Those hours were insane. This working here, even though it's a lot, it feels like nothing. I was working 7 days a week, 20 hours a day there. I would sleep on the train, take a shower, get back on the train, sleep, and just go back to work for years. So that totally shifted my entire, not just my work ethic, but how I look at creativity, how I look at business. I've told people, like, I having worked with Quincy and having worked with Michael, like, I go into every project I do, like, this project should be the next Sergeant Pepper's, or the next Pet Sounds, or the next The Wall, or Bruce Springsteen. Everything I work on, I want to be that big. Now, it doesn't always work, right? But I go into everything like, this can be the next biggest thing that's ever hit, the airwaves. Can we make Thriller? Can we do something that huge, something that transforms society? And that's literally how I approach everything, whether it's Chinese medicine curriculum, or hiring faculty, or creating a CEU, whatever it is. Like, my mentality is, what would Quincy do? Right? What would Michael Jackson do? What would Aretha do? So I did that for a number of years, and my biggest client was Christina Aguilera. After I worked with Michael and Quincy, a good friend of mine, whose name is also Mike Jackson, he was calling me and saying, I'm working with this girl in New York, and she's 14, and she was in the Mickey Mouse Club, and she's really amazing. And I was like, I was coming off of Quincy and Michael. I was like, I mean, amazing? Like, how? Sure, I'm sure she's amazing. Like, I was like, what am I going to do with a 14-year-old who can sing? Just, there was no blueprint for it. The world was listening to Toni Braxton and Celine Dion. And then he sent me a tape, and I was like, oh yeah, she's incredible. So we worked together. I think I met Christina when she was 15 or so. We did a demo in my apartment in LA. And within a few months, she had a record deal. And obviously the rest of that is history as well. I continued to work with her for, I guess, 3 records. And we're still friends. And again, also, like, just transformational projects. How do you go from nothing, from a demo recorded in a bedroom, to, a multi-platinum recording artist who's, basically writing her own life story.
Yeah, that's really incredible, and I can, I can kind of resonate with that mindset a little bit. How you bring that that sort of mindset into what you're doing with
Yeah.
your son now. Yeah, yeah. You had the bar set pretty high at an early age.
That's true. Yeah. No, and I kind of warned our board of trustees. I was like, are you sure you're ready for me? Like, are you sure? Because, like, I don't want to just, like, get us to, like, here. I want to take it. We're going to go worldwide, baby. Let's go. Like, Yosan London, Yosan Paris, here we come. So I think I'm glad my board is, who our founders are on our board, which is great. The board is supportive and conservative at the same time, and that's good, because as a musician at heart, as a creative at heart, it's easy for me to be like, yeah, let's buy the building next door. Here we go. But to have that guidance from our founders is really helpful.
For sure. And is there anything you'd like to share about what's next for your son in the near future?
So many things. No. Yeah. I mean, yes, there are. But I mean, one of the things that I really want to do, is build conferences and symposiums and classes that the world, can kind of take advantage of. This weekend, we just put together, like, a translation conference that's Sabina Wilms and Elizabeth Rochade de la Vallée and Nigel Wiseman and Corey and Michael and Alan, like, you know, Sabina and I have been talking about this for a long time. You know, again, understanding that the translation of Chinese language and Chinese medicine texts, you know, is so important. There's like maybe 1% of the texts have been translated
Oh
into
yeah.
English. You know, it's rough to understand that idea, or to comprehend that. So we've talked about a translation conference for a long time. And a couple months ago, I was like, you know, I'm just going to do it. Let me email Sabina. And at first I thought like, well, maybe it'll just be a Sunday morning. It'll be me and Sabina and Leo, and maybe we'll get Alan, and that'll be cool. And I emailed like 3 or 4 people, and they're all like, yeah, we'll do it. And then each one of them was like, but you should call so and so and so and so and so and so. So I emailed those people, and we filled up the first day of speakers, 8 speakers, in like a half hour. And then I was like, well, maybe I can do 2 days. And I emailed a bunch of other people, and suddenly we had 16 amazing practitioners and translators, you know, willing to speak at this conference. So like, I want to bring like that energy and like all of those experts. To me, I just did what Quincy Jones did. You know, like if you're Quincy Jones and you're going to record a song this weekend, you call the best musicians. Like, who's the best drummer for this? Who's the best guitar player? Who's the best singer? Who's the best background singer? So when I'm putting together a conference, like that's how I treat it. You know, I'm like, again, what would Quincy do? Like, who would he hire? So I'm always thinking of like, how do I build this group of faculty or this group of teachers or this group of translators so that other people will be just as excited, you know, as I am. Quincy once said to me, make sure you're not the smartest person in the room, you know, and surround yourself with people more talented than you. And I think if you just, whatever leadership position you might find yourself in, if you approach it that way, like you can't really lose. You know, you're just always searching for the greatest talent. So when I put together these conferences that are, you know, open to the public, like that's my goal. You know, I'm trying to create Coachella. I'm trying to create Live Aid, you know, on a smaller scale for Chinese medicine. So I think if anybody was interested in Yosan and kind of what we do, like that would be the first place to look at these conferences and symposia that we do, you know, and see if they're interesting.
Yeah.
That would
Oh,
be
great.
that would be a
So
good connection.
yeah, everyone keep an eye out.
Yeah.
And where can people find these online? Just on your
Yeah.
website,
So
on
for
your
this,
Facebook and Instagram?
yeah, the school website is just yosan.edu. That's always an easy
Hmm.
place. But I'm on all the, you know, Instagrams and Facebooks. I'm old enough where Facebook is still cool to me. I know a lot
I
of the kids
Oh,
aren't
I
into
think
it, but
it's pretty for Chinese medicine. There's a bit of a group happening. It's
there
what
is.
keeps me
Yeah.
coming back. It seems quite unique because
Yeah.
people can talk and interact in a way that maybe they can't on some other
And it's
platforms.
a cordial group. And
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
key, right? There's
yeah.
no rage baiting. It's a good group of people.
No.
So I think it's worthwhile for all
It
of that.
heats up sometimes, but it's generally pretty good.
Yeah, it's over like the punctuation of a classical text,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like, no, there's no comma there. It's a period. You know, it's
Something like
super
that.
nerdy. Yeah,
Yeah,
my wife will look over my shoulder and she's like, "What are you reading?"
yeah,
I'm like, "I'm reading about the punctuation of this text," and she's like,
yeah,
"Ah, killing me." But yeah, it is a good place for our, you know, our connectedness, I think.
yeah. All right. Well, great. Thank you for your time today, Rob.
Oh, thank
It
you.
was great to learn a little bit more about what you do and the situation with things at Yosan. And yeah, thank you for your great work and what you're doing for the industry.
Thanks for having me. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah, my pleasure. All right. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.